Hey everyone, welcome to the XP Gaming Podcast with MTB and Ronal. Two dudes, some microphones, and games. For this episode, we're going to be talking about the recent gaming phenomenon, the game that can probably end up killing itself, World of Warcraft Classic. So with me today, as always, is my co-host Ronal. So where's the cow dancing tonight, man?
Man, the cow's dancing in front of the bank in the Undercity. Which is right now not as many people as you'd hope to see, but looks like there's still a good amount of people running around. Pretty excited to get this going with you. Looking at having some fun doing the grind in the classic.
I feel like everyone's after their mount gold right now. You know, it seems like the base of the population is getting to that, like, you know, close to 40 or 40. So like the banks and the auction houses seem to be just absolutely populated. So it surprises me a little bit that the bank isn't hopping, but maybe it's late enough that everyone's out there farming or something.
Oh man, everyone's out there killing those devil swords, looking for that leather. Got to get that classic epic mount at 1,000 gold, which, you know, at least half the people will quit by then, right? So.
Well, it kind of cracks me up because the game came out on August 26th of this year, so we're about a month and a half into it, and I think more than anything that I see on Reddit are these incredible stories, or, you know, people that were farming for a mount and then they got like the Baron Rivendare drop, which in Classic is like 0.01%. It's like the rarest mount drop in the game, and it just brings back all these nostalgic feelings for me about stories that back then it was you'd read them on the forums, but it's gone back to that. Like, you see the Reddit poster, you hear about it in game. It's just really cool that a month and a half into the classic experience, we're already seeing these crazy stories coming out of the game. Have you heard any yourself for people that are, you know, something really cool has happened, or you experienced something and now you see somebody else do it?
I think some of the coolest things that matter now versus retail are the class quests themselves. So for example, I'm grinding away as a warrior, and as a warrior starting, you know, in the early levels, you start doing class specific quests, right, that are not as relevant now in the real game or the retail version of the game, because everything's just kind of given to you as your level. And so it's been kind of fun to randomly group up with people to try to kill things that are way above your level. And during the class questing itself with the warrior, so I had to go through a rather long and epic quest line to get a sword, which, you know, is really a blue sword that's good for 10 levels, which is a big deal in Classic versus, you know, having heirloom gear like in the retail version of the game. Just last night we were questing in Arathi, and there is the end of a quest line that takes you to the Badlands, and you kill a bunch of elementals, and you come back up, and it's called Summoning the Princess. And the big deal with it is you're level 41, 42, and it's a red 50 level quest. And that just basically means if you try that on your own, you're dead. And if you try it with two people on your own, you're more dead. And because it's classic and nothing's given to you, the reagent that starts the quest is something you have to go farm again if you die. It's pretty brutal. So we ended up getting it with a group of 5 people that was kind of random. But what I like about Classic is that the community aspect is coming back to the game, and I think that's why it's so popular. The fact that you can run around, randomly group up with people, and those people are just excited to help you. And even though there's really nothing in it for them other than maybe some XP and maybe a couple silver, they just want to play the game. And I think that the retail version of WoW has lost that community aspect, and I really think that's what's going to make Classic sustainable.
Well, and you said something to me that is one of the most critical things about Classic that, and we'll kind of get into where we're at with each of our characters and what we've done in the game here in a little bit, but immediately upon getting back into the game, one of the first things that I noticed was it's not so much the quests that have the nostalgia, but it's the feeling while doing them. And what I mean by that is, you just mentioned a quest line that's grueling, it's brutal, Nothing's handed to you. But it's more about having to figure out a way to get help. You can't just hit the LFG or, create some group where people just show up. It really is like someone running by and you send them a message like, hey, I need help. Can you help me? And, 50% of the time they act like they don't speak English and keep running. But then over time, you end up with 5 people that need to get the quest done and you figure out a way to do it. So it's crazy. It's something that's kind of lost in retail, I agree. Which is also interesting because those are all things that we asked for over time and they culminated into this product that is just different. Classic is different than retail by a huge margin. But what I'm finding to be the most important thing about Classic is the storylines about accomplishing certain things, not necessarily the actual quests themselves.
Yeah, and the other thing about when you're randomly grouping with people is that server reputation matters now. So without having combined servers, whatever they're calling it these days, but with having battle groups or whatever, where there's 4 or 5 servers that are literally turning into one big server, and then you end up in a situation where you never see the same person twice, or if you do, it's so insignificant that it doesn't really matter. And we're running into situations now with the RestedXP Guild, which is our official guild for XP Gaming on Thunderfury-US Horde. So you're all welcome to, if you're leveling there, hit us up. But we're running into situations now where they're actually, you run into the same people. So just the other night, we were doing some dungeons, and we were talking to this hunter that we had run with a couple of times, and he's like, hey, it's good to see you again, how's it going, whatever. And that's just, it's just such a big deal in this version of the game, and the community aspect gets pushed forward with all those interactions. And I think the having your own server community makes it both good and bad, but it encourages good behavior, which makes the game just more fun for everybody.
Yeah, and it's so funny you brought that up because I didn't even think about this as we were getting ready for the podcast tonight. But I was streaming today playing PUBG, and somebody came into my chat, and I'm gonna use their name here. If I have to edit it out later, that's fine. But actually, I just won't use their name, that way we don't have to edit anything. But basically, somebody came into my chat and they had a name that was similar to a name of somebody that I played with back in Classic. And back in the original version of Classic, I played a priest. I raided all the way through half of Naxxramas. So I basically saw all of Classic WoW up through half of the last raid tier. Did PvP, did all of it. But we had very consistent guild, and we had very consistent tanks and healers. So you bring up this idea of reputation, and there was a particular tank in our guild that had probably the best reputation as a tank, as someone that was willing to help, as somebody that was willing to basically do anything for anybody that required a warrior tank that was well geared, which, as you know, over time in Classic, there's a lot of things that need good tanks. Well, just today, this afternoon, someone with a name similar to this individual came into chat, and we started talking, and they were like, yeah, I used to go by this other name. And I was like, wait a minute. Did you happen to play WoW? And if so, what server, and was it the same character name that you just mentioned? And they were like, yeah, and there was this stupid priest in my guild named Remedy. And I used to play a priest named Remedy, and I spelled it Remedee. Right? I was one of the. There was a few people with that name, but I was the only priest that had that name that rated a high tier. So I immediately knew that was this person, and I have not talked to this individual in over a decade. It's probably been 12 years or however long it's been, because after Classic, just due to life circumstances, he kind of moved on. He played a little Burning Crusade and then moved on. But that happened literally this afternoon. And I was just like beaming because it was a reputation thing. I was like, this is somebody I haven't talked to in like 10 years, probably 12 years. And we're talking about all these ridiculous things that we did back in the game. So I agree with you. That's lost right now. The reputation thing, and sorry for that long explanation of that, but that reputation thing, it carried forward 12 years for me this afternoon, reconnecting with someone that I had no way of getting in contact with. They just happened to start playing the retail version of the game again. We're still in the guild that we created back in Classic, and they found the Discord and saw me streaming in the Discord. Crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy, and I think that's really something that could come back. I think Blizzard is paying attention to what's going on with Classic. There's been some reports that WoW subscriptions tripled for Classic for the first month in August and September. Now, obviously, some of that's going to, fall off as people get to 60 or kind of relive what they enjoyed about it and kind of move on. But I'll just give you an example just from the other night. I was questing by myself, and someone in our guild messaged me and said, "Hey, I'm playing with this hunter," and he said, "Is your GM Ronal XP?" And he was helping me quest the other day, and you guys are pretty cool. And he was just kind of talking about his interaction with me to one of the other people in the guild, and I think it's important because server reputation makes the gaming experience a little bit more personalized, I guess would be the way I put it, because you actually have to pay attention. The internet's so full of anonymous people who just dump on each other, and with server reputation you have to really pay attention to what you're doing and how you're doing it. And then at the same time, though, it builds community, and you get the reputation as that tank that can help you, or that healer that's the go-to person. And your friends list becomes this list of people that you log in and you're like, oh man, I'm excited to see these 5 people who aren't in the guild, but they're just people who are cool and that I end up talking to. And I think that's what drew a lot of people to WoW back really in its heyday. And over time, I think Blizzard has kind of gotten a little bit away from that. Because, for whatever reason, gamers have changed, and maybe we get into that in a little bit. But I think there's definitely a segment of people who are. I don't even really think it depends on age. I think it really is about personality and like how you want to play a game. Some people would say that WoW is kind of like, in this context, is almost like having a part-time job. But really, at the end of the day, it's less about racing to the end of it and more about enjoying the game for what it is. And I think so many games now end up being a race to, like if you're in PUBG, a race to maximize each gun, a race in WoW and retail WoW, race to max level just to raid. And then you're bored for like 6 months because you do everything in a month. And I think we're losing the just the enjoyment of enjoying the journey. And a Classic really was a good mix of that, from back in the day where you really enjoyed the journey. And believe it or not, Classic back in the day was a casual game. It was considered to be a casual gamer's game.
Right.
If you think about it, you think about EverQuest and those games where you had significant penalties for dying and all of those, and Classic didn't have that. You died, you ran back to your corpse, and that was it. So I think today it's considered more of a hardcore game, but really it creates a level of enjoyment that you can get along the way.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring that up because it is a little punishing right now if you're not used to how Classic operates. But back when I was playing Classic, yeah, I started it because I didn't really know anything about MMOs. It was just the one that was popular or becoming popular at the time. And then I ended up leveling a shaman to level 53 as enhancement or elemental, and it was like, I was awful. I didn't know what I was doing, and I ended up rerolling that priest. But it's interesting because back then I was playing it a lot more, and I would say in a much more hardcore way, but this time around I'm playing much more casual. Now, I don't even know what level you are at this point, but I started a rogue because I always wanted to have a rogue in Classic because I thought they had the coolest daggers. Or the coolest swords. Like, you could just do really cool stuff with rogue. But I'm only I think I'm like level 16 or 17 right now. And it's been a blast. I play a lot of PUBG. That's my primary game. And I've been dabbling in teamfight tactics. And then when I have a little bit of time to just chill out and do some quests, I jump into WoW. WoW Classic specifically. And it's been awesome. And I'm taking my time. I'm not in a hurry. There's tons of guilds out there that are already farming legendaries, for crying out loud. But I'm not feeling the pressure to get to level 60 or to do anything fast because I've seen a lot of that content, and I'm excited to see that in the future again from a different perspective as a DPS, but I'm not in a hurry.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think overall, I would say I'm enjoying the journey myself. I've been playing primarily Classic now for a couple months in my game time, and I'm just doing level 43. And I'm averaging probably like 6 to 8 hours per level, depending upon what I end up doing. And that is partially my choice. Partially the game does slow down during this time. Could I grind it out and do it faster? Probably. But I'm actually having fun logging in and hanging out in a capital city, finding a group, go run in a dungeon, helping some guildies out, and I don't get XP for that, but I'll just go help them quest. And again, it's when you play a video game, there are different types of gamers. Some people play because they just absolutely have to be the best no matter what, and they have to win. And if you're driven like that, MMOs, I think are not gonna keep your interest long term, because MMOs are not designed to be raced through and then keep your interest. MMOs are designed to be the journey. And obviously WoW is the most successful MMO of all time, and Classic WoW in and of itself, I think, really set that standard that obviously so many games over the last 15 years have tried to copy. And it is interesting to know what we know now about Warcraft 15 years later, and know what we know about MMO and game design now, and have this game that's so old yet so relevant just kind of pop up and keep so many people's attention. I think that it's a lesson for game studios to really look at and say, what and how are they creating these experiences for gamers, and really, where does that go from here?
And I think that's been one of my burning questions. So in my mind, I'm trying to figure out what's going to happen with this game. And I kind of gave my opinion in the intro to the episode here. But it really seems to me that Classic WoW has the potential to quote-unquote kill retail WoW. And I don't think either one of them is going to, honestly kill the other one. Blizzard's not going to turn them off. It's on the same subscription model, so it doesn't really kill it. But they know the numbers. They know where people are at. But I'm just curious what they're going to do, because there's something to this. There's a ton of people playing it. There's a ton of people enjoying it. And it's reliving old content. And it kind of follows the same thing that Hollywood does with movies. You had a movie that worked in 1984. Remake it. It'll probably do well. Make it 3 more times, 4 more times. For crying out loud, they're basically redoing Star Wars right now, and it's doing great. It's retelling a similar story with new faces on it. Classic WoW is, it's got some facelifts in terms of server performance and some other stuff, but for the most part, it's the same game. So I'm trying to figure out, do they just run Classic and let it go down its develop? Just go through the Classic experience, get through Nax and it's done? And then people can hang out and farm if they want, or level alts? Do they release Burning Crusade servers and then Wrath of the Lich King servers, etc.? Or is it timed for them to let Classic run its course and then start developing new content for Classic? I'm trying to figure out what would be the best option, because Blizzard's certainly interested in the number of subscribers in the game, but they're also interested in people continuing to play both games, I would imagine. So that's the question I have. I don't know which way is going to be the best for the players and for the company.
I think we're going to see some definite elements from Classic get integrated into the retail game. I think BlizzCon this year, I think everyone's kind of in agreement that they're going to announce the next expansion for retail. With the recent content stream of the 8.3 live stream, where they announced all the details there kind of in N'Zoth and how it's going to finish up the retail storyline. I think we're going to see the next expansion there. And I think that Blizzard probably is doing a little bit of a rewrite of some of the next expansion based upon the success of Classic. I mean, if obviously we have no idea what's going on in the inner workings of Blizzard, but I mean, it just makes sense that if they were going to release the end of Battle for Azeroth right now with just a live stream, they definitely are thinking, okay, we need some more time to develop the next expansion because we're going to change a few things. And I think that we're going to see some systems that have been long gone in the game get reintroduced, maybe in a different way, but get reintroduced. And also, just in general, the game itself is grindy, and it's a little bit of a system. You know, there's a lot going on with the new retail version of WoW. And so you say, like, classic WoW was grindy, but the type of grinding that you did was relatively simple, which made it relaxing. And in retail, when you're grinding, you end up in a situation where you're doing things that aren't fun to grind. You're literally doing the same concept over and over and over again, and it just doesn't end up being fun, I think, because there's no community involved with the grinding.
Yeah, so you mentioned something really interesting to me. You said you think some old systems that have been long gone might find their way back into the retail game, because I agree. I mean, Blizzard's paying attention, and I think you can read between the lines in what they're thinking, that they had no idea how big it was going to be. They didn't have anywhere near the number of servers they needed. They still don't. There's still some servers that have queues, for crying out loud. But are there systems you think will make a resurgence into retail WoW as a result of this? Like, do you have a specific one?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things that we can expect to see in the retail game make a comeback as something different. I think they're going to iterate on the talent system. I think that the way that the talents work right now, they're really boring, and it doesn't allow a lot of agency in how you create your player experience. And I really think that the talent system itself, only having in retail, you only have 7 or 8 choices, whatever it is, right? And you get them every 15 levels, and then everything else just kind of happens automatically. It disconnects you from the gaming experience, from the actual player development, to the point where you have no investment in what spells you're using or how your character works. You just don't have any investment in it. And in Classic, having so many different talent points that you have to spend, and each talent point actually makes a tangible difference in how you play the game. I think that creates just so much more interaction with the player, and so much more reason to play the game, that I think we're going to see a resurgence of something like that in the future.
It's funny because as you were talking, I immediately went to that idea of balance, right? And what Blizzard has worked so hard to do in the current version of the game is balance, right? And it's always like tweaking little percentages here, little percentages there. And furthermore, it's all about making sure that every single spec of every single class is at least in the mix. And I think that's the most interesting part about Classic, is that there are specs that are just downright useless. And this was the thing, that people still play those classes because they loved the concept or whatever, but it's like Ret Paladins, not so great. Feral Druids, not so great. And again, some of this is right now because the loot in the game doesn't allow them to be good. And, once people start getting into BWL and really farming out BWL, you can get a Feral Druid tank, but it takes some time. It takes a while. And it's interesting you bring up those talent trees, because it's kind of the same thing. It got to a point with the talent trees where Blizzard was basically balancing around the best possible talent scheme that you could pick. And in the game as it stands right now, there's some things that are absolutely broken, overpowered in those talent trees, and there's things that are useless, but you kind of have to figure that out. And the way Classic runs is, yeah, you can do all the research you want, but it's funny, I jumped into the game and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to think about what points to put where? I kind of completely forgot about talents, because it's not like, oh, I'm level 60 and I need to respec to, from Holy to Shadow. No, I was level 10 and I have to pick my first point. yikes, what do I do here? I want to keep playing. I don't want to go research it on Google right now.
Yeah, and it's funny because you mentioned Ret Paladins, and I got to give a shout out to all my Ret Paladins out there. I've been playing Ret Paladin since Wrath, and very much enjoy that. It's something that I couldn't really do in Classic because of a couple of reasons, but you're right, the spec is definitely more challenging, I'll just say. And of course, when you're playing Horde, you don't have the option to play a Paladin. So it's interesting. I would say that I'll give you an example, kind of what my journey's been in Classic when it comes to talents, and I'll kind of explain what I like about it and what I don't like about it. I mean, what I really, really like about it is that each talent matters. And when you start making your choice, you not only does a talent matter, if you make a choice that you don't want, you have to pay, I mean, it costs a gold to undo your talents. And that is in the retail version, you're like, 1 gold, I've got 500,000 or 1 million gold, who cares, right? But in Classic, a gold is a lot. It represents a large amount of effort. And right now, for example, I started leveling, and I thought, I'm going to level doing dungeons. I'm going to level as prot, and I knew that I wouldn't do a lot of damage. I knew that wasn't going to be a thing, but I wanted to play a warrior because I honestly have never really played a warrior in WoW. I think I've had a couple of warrior alts. I got them to level 30, got bored with it, and deleted them. And so I wanted to really try a warrior in its real true Classic sense. So started playing as prot, got to level like 22, 23. It just wasn't working, and said this isn't going to work. And so I ended up respecking as Fury, and obviously DPS spec, and you can still throw a shield in a one-hander and still tank a dungeon if you have to. But obviously full DPS spec, got my Berserker stance, did the quest, did the warrior quest, got my sword, sword or the axe, depending upon what you do. A lot of people say it's blasphemy to pick the axe on that quest, but I picked the sword because I think it looks cooler. And that's the other thing. Talk about transmog in a bit, but or lack of it. But so I picked the sword because I think it looks great. And when you make those choices in the Fury tree, and I got to the bottom of the tree just 2 levels ago, and I hit that Mortal Strike button, and that was a moment where it's like, I've invested my time. My character now has an ability that is very meaningful and impactful, and because of that, my gameplay is something I look forward to for so long. The gameplay is just that much more enjoyable for me. And that sense of accomplishment along the way of leveling has just been out of retail for so long that I think that Blizzard is desperate to try to recapture that feeling, to keep players active and keep people engaged in the game. And so that's why I think we're going to see some resurgence of these systems in the retail game. Again, I don't know how it's going to end up looking. Obviously, you can't just make a wholesale change, but we're going to see something.
Oh, and I agree. It's the exact thing that you're talking about is my exact experience in retail. Every single expansion, I tend to come back at the end of the expansion in the pre-release time between the next one, and I play it for a while, and then I play the new expansion, and I usually play through the first raid. And then in that first dead spot in between the first raid and the second raid, I get bored. And, I get sick of doing daily quests. And, you join a group and then you kill something and then you leave. And there's no interaction. And you make a really good point, because in my mind, I jokingly talk about one game killing the other one. And in my mind, it's hard to figure out how the 2 games exist side by side. But there's probably a reality that they can take things from Classic, or take lessons from Classic, which would probably be a better way to look at it, apply them to retail, and in the next expansion, or even in patches in the near future, do things to make retail better, or more player-centric, where it gets people talking to each other again, or there's got to be a way to do it that doesn't just completely strip retail of all the things that's in retail. Because the truth is, I like going into retail. I just don't stay there very often. I play for a couple months at a time, and then I go 6 to 9 not playing, and I'm perfectly comfortable with that. the interesting thing part about Classic is people are like, I don't want to leave.
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head here. You go into retail, you play for a month, and then you leave for 6 to 9 months. And the reason why you can come back is because the retail experience is only focused around racing to do a certain piece of content, which isn't that long, and then you're done. And the journey doesn't matter. It's not sticky. And that's why we've seen a slow attrition of WoW over time. I really believe that. It's why you see a resurgence every time there's an expansion released, because the interest in the game, in the mechanics, in the story is there from everybody. From all the, 100 million accounts that have been created over time. But what happens is Blizzard has totally lost the idea that the journey matters. And so I think you really made a good point there.
So I'm going to go back to what I sort of was battling in my own head earlier, and I'm going to ask you directly. Do you think Classic remains Classic? Do they move into Burning Crusade? Or do they create new content for Classic? Because the lore, the interest in the game, all of that still remains more than a decade later. So what do you think they should do?
I think it's a tough question to answer, because it's easy to say, okay, you've stumbled upon something that's successful, just go with it. But there is, again, the breadth of WoW and its influence in gaming. You just really can't ignore that. This single game has shaped the direction and destiny of companies and different genres of games in general. And I think it's a tough question to answer. Now, I'm not going to dodge it. I'm going to tell you my opinion. I think that they should not iterate on the game beyond what it is, and I'll kind of explain why. I think there's an opportunity here to do a couple of really valid and interesting things for the player base and make retail more popular all at the same time. Blizzard has a chance here to take the things that are successful in Classic, and believe me, there's a lot more analytics now. Blizzard is a data information company. I mean, don't kid yourself. They know how long we spend standing in front of the bank dancing versus actually doing real content. And they're going to say, wait a minute, Ronal standing in front of the bank, there might be something fun with this. Let's add a new dance emoji for Torrent. So anyways, we keep going with that. So I think what's going to happen is they're going to take a look at how people play Classic, and they're going to integrate those lessons slowly into retail. And my hope is twofold here. I'm hoping that the Classic experience leads to a whole generation of players getting to do content that they never were able to do, because again, the game was progressing over time, things were happening fast, new content was coming out, and people were not able to say, okay, when Dire Maul comes out, right? So in a couple of months, Dire Maul is going to come out. And this second time around, a lot of people for the first time are going to be able to play Dire Maul at a somewhat, I'll say, normal level. Whereas before, you were like, oh no, I'm still a hunter at level 21 running out of arrows. I'm not ready to do Dire Maul. And whereas the main contingents of the hardcore people were racing through the content, and those people never had a chance, if they wanted to feel relevant on the edge of content. And I think that Blizzard is really going to get a twofer out of this deal. They're going to learn what pieces of the old Classic experience they really need to integrate into WoW over time. And they're going to have the nostalgia experience from the WoW players that's really going to keep people sub to the game just to play Classic. And those people are going to have such a good experience that I think that it's really going to really create an environment where people are excited about WoW again in a way they haven't been in a long time. So I would say no. I really hope that they release the phases over time, spread it out over 2 or 3 years. And I really hope that at the end of it, everyone gets a chance. And I mean, most of the players get their chance to do Nax the way that Nax should have been done. And if you want to do that, I hope you get your chance to be relevant. And we will hit an end point with Classic. But again, it takes so long and so much time to invest in one character to get to that point. You can always roll an alt.
It's funny to even think about an alt right now because I have zero interest in that. But you're right. And in Classic, I had an alt. It was a druid. But I have a slightly different opinion on that. I don't think they should iterate on Classic. I don't think it should go down its own development path beyond Nax. But I do think it would be really cool if they went through the Burning Crusade and then into Wrath. And I don't know if it goes much beyond that, but I really feel like the first 3 expansions of this game, it was like Classic was amazing. It was this new thing. It was a more casual game that turned into a very hardcore game. I mean, Nax in its original state was played by very few people, and I think it'll get played by a lot more this time around. But that was a hardcore crew to get 40 people geared up and through Nax. And then Burning Crusade was really where, in my opinion, PvP got done right. And so for me, Burning Crusade was all about the PvP, and raiding was great there as well. But all of the things they added in Burning Crusade were amazing. And then Wrath of the Lich King, for me, maybe is or was or whatever you want to call it, was really the one that I spent the most time in. But they really got PvE and PvP right in Wrath of the Lich King, in my opinion. So, again, for nostalgia purposes, for me wanting to go through it with a little more maturity under my belt, I'd love to see them go into future expansions. But I also can see your point that Classic WoW, this is the experience, this is what we're going to do. So I'm more than anything, I'm excited to see what Blizzard does with this. Because we can speculate all day long, and we can want all day long. But I would love for them to really do something. To your point, they are a data collection company. It's all numbers at the end of the day. And from a business perspective, they were able to rehash an old idea and turn it into something that put jet fuel into their little, VW bug or something. And it's exploding in a way that nobody really predicted except for the players.
Yeah, I think that what they're going to do is really figure out what is working and what doesn't work. Because I think one of the problems that retail WoW has right now is it's kind of like 15 years of success where, how do you iterate on that, right? So how do you change it without breaking it? And I think Blizzard in general with WoW is really at that place. You can be so successful with a product that you're like, okay, we feel like we have to make it different, but making it different makes it worse. So then what do you do? And I think that part of why Blizzard really released Classic, and they'll never really say it, but my guess, just from a business perspective, is that they're like, wait a minute, we need to get back to what we know works, and if they release Classic now, let's see what this generation of gamers, what works with this generation of gamers that was the success of Classic. And so that's why I think that you're not going to see Classic iterated on in the sense of an entirely new development track. I don't think that makes sense. But I think what we're going to see is, I do think we'll see a Burning Crusade server. I hope that it's not, I hope they leave the Classic servers up, and I hope Burning Crusade ends up being a different set of servers. I hope that you can copy your character from Classic to Burning Crusade, much like how you can copy to the PTR. I mean, that tech exists, so that wouldn't be that big of a stretch for that to happen. And I would like to see it go with Wrath. I think in the WoW player base, you're going to see people who want every iteration of WoW to go up with their own set of servers. I'd say one more thing about RuneScape did this, right? So RuneScape, if you look at RuneScape Classic and you look at RuneScape, they decided at one point as just a random, almost just gift to the player base, hey, we found an old backup of RuneScape. We're going to make RuneScape Classic. And now RuneScape, and what they did is people loved the original RuneScape so much. And I've got a friend and a coworker who loves RuneScape and loves RuneScape Classic. And what ended up happening is, if you look at the population of RuneScape, we just looked at it the other day for fun, and there's like 25,000 people playing the retail, the new version of RuneScape, and there's 100,000 people playing the classic version. And they almost ended up at a point where they made their primary product irrelevant because they chose to iterate on their old product. And it's almost like, think about it emotionally. You get a do-over with like your favorite game, and that's dangerous, I think, for a product. And we talked earlier, you mentioned how WoW could be the thing that kills itself, and I think that they'll never iterate on Classic because I think that would ultimately kill all of it.
But if it was a better game, is that better for the long term? Like, RuneScape has been going on forever now. Like, I'm looking at it from a player and wanting new experiences, and the reason I get disinterested with WoW in the retail version is because of a lack of content, a lack of things to do. So iterating on an experience, yeah, it may kill it, but if people wanted iteration on the Classic and it kept sub numbers up or higher, isn't that what Blizzard's gonna do?
I don't think so. I think on the surface, that makes a lot of sense. But I think if you really get into it, think about it, if not from a gaming perspective, from a branding perspective, if they start iterating on WoW, they're going to damage the WoW brand, because it's almost like saying, yep, the last 10 plus years after WoW Classic were a mistake. And I think that you're not going to see Activision allow Blizzard to do that. I do think, though, that they saw the popularity of private servers. They see the decline in subs, and they see the bump in the content. Whenever they release a new expansion, they see that bump. And what that bump, I think, means to them is that there is a large amount of interest in the game and what they're doing to it. But the drop-off of subs and the drop-off of players after an expansion really means that there is not a large amount of interest in what they've done to it. And I think that in the end, what's going to end up happening is Blizzard's going to use Classic as a way to determine the future of the retail version of the game. And I really think that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's something I hadn't considered before we sat down and started talking about this, is that they don't have to remain completely separate. I mean, the games obviously will, but the lessons learned in retail, the lessons learned in Classic can be used to... And again, I think the lessons learned in retail are probably more data-driven, right? Because anytime something gets released from a time standpoint, or, you know, a new patch comes out in retail and it's timed in a way that would require people to, you know, it's delayed so that you'd have to sub another month, or you know, there's these data tools that Blizzard Activision probably has that gives them the ability to maybe figure out how to get the most money from a particular decision from a release standpoint. And so they can probably use the data and the back-end tools to affect exactly how to run Classic in a way that's going to be both good for the players and profitable. And then learning lessons the other way from Classic to retail is, I actually agree with what you said. I think they're going to learn a lot about what works in Classic, and they're going to learn a lot about what doesn't work, you know, from community feedback or their community team. But they probably have really cool, you know, server insight into what people are actually doing, don't want to do, you know, what they log out after they're doing, or where they stop in certain quest chains. Like, yeah, they must have a ton of data coming in that I guess it can really only mean good things for Blizzard Activision. And I guess with the iteration on Classic, yeah, you bring up a good point. They don't want to kill their own game because they've got a successful game. So why would you do that? So yeah, good points. I like it.
I think what we're going to see is integration between the two products more. So there's going to be some incentive for the player base to, if you play one or the other, to play the other one. So for example, there'll be something, they'll know that 75% of the players playing Classic have hit 60. And then you're going to see something that's going to happen that's going to say, okay, come into the retail version of WoW. There's going to be a crossover that is something that's going to be that incentive. So I think really what we're going to end up seeing is is a nice mix of both. And I think the community already is reacting positively, as positive as they can. And I think that overall, the design decisions Blizzard makes, if they really do this right, they could not only save WoW, I think, but I think they could really make it really that much more popular and back on top.
Yeah, and I agree. And I do want to talk more about just classic WoW, the game itself in general, because they've proven that they have the ability to capture people's attention. They've stuck to their promise of always putting out quality games, even if they needed to delay some stuff. And it took forever to get this product to the market, but they did it right. I mean, outside of the launch, which was crash-filled, tons of weight on the servers, now it's just tons of content flowing in all the time about people enjoying the game. So, I guess we sort of touched on this before, and we've talked a lot about, what works in classic and not necessarily in retail, but I wanted to ask you specifically, because you've got more hours in classic than I do. Is there something that you've missed or are missing from the retail version that's not present in the classic game? Like, maybe it surprised you, or, you were like, oh my gosh, I can't do this, seriously?
That's an interesting question. I think at first I was missing kind of the speed at which you get gear in retail and even heirlooms. It made the questing experience just, you didn't even think about it. And I would say for our first couple levels, I was like, oh man, I don't have my chauffeur, which I don't have my mount at level 0, this is just going to be a grind. But then at the same time, it's kind of hard to explain. You end up in this scenario where you're questing in Mulgore, and you're walking around and you're still gaining power and progressing at a reasonable rate. And because of that, the experience isn't bad. What it is just different. It's just very different. And I think that in general, that we as players have kind of lost in WoW the ability to enjoy the journey. And I would say that by now, by level 42, I don't miss anything from retail. And I've had a WoW sub. I've had an active WoW sub since 2008. And I haven't had any breaks. And so I'm saying that I don't miss anything from retail at this point. As a matter of fact, I'm grinding out my gold for my mount, and I'm level 43, and I'm still grinding the gold out, and I'm enjoying the journey. And it's relaxing, and it's just something where it definitely is tied to, I'll say, my phase of life. I'm definitely 15 years older than I was when I first started playing WoW. And because of that, we're gamer dads, both of us. And because of that, our lives are a little different. And the time that we spend playing games, when you have a real job and real family and real everything, same. And I think that at the end of the day, what that really means is that you want the experience to be relaxing. That's why we play video games in the first place. And it depends upon, how that ends up working for you. But I think in general, I'm loving every minute of it. I don't miss a thing from retail at this point. I'm enjoying even reading quest text. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's such an irrelevant thing in the retail version of the game. It's something I never did in retail. I never read the quest text. I just opened up my map and looked where to go. And I'm enjoying everything about it. So I'd say no. I really am not looking for anything right now.
It's funny because I don't think there's anything that I'm like, oh, I really want this, and add-ons can replace a lot of the stuff, quest helpers and things like that. I think the most interesting part of what you just said is that little piece about, reading quest text. And there are plenty of nights where I could have logged into Classic and, gone and just grind out some mobs or whatever. But there's all these little things that I'm like, wow, man, I don't want to leave the inn. I want to stack my rested experience. I really wanted, I want to read the quests. I want to go out and explore. So in retail, you could log in for 30 minutes and do a round of dailies, not talk to anybody and log out. And I just have this different feeling of logging into Classic. Like, part of me is like, 30 minutes isn't enough. I don't think I can, talk to the guildies. I don't think I can get a whole quest chain done. So I actually look forward to the times when I have enough time or it's quiet enough at my house to log into WoW and really sit down for a nice gaming session. And that doesn't bother me at all. I feel better about paying the $15 right now than I ever have in the past. And I'm probably playing it less than I ever did in the past. So it's just a really interesting and cool experience thus far.
Yep, I would agree. It's definitely so different than what retail is. And it doesn't matter if you longed for the days of Classic or not. I think at this point, the people who said that they longed for the days of Classic, it's been so long, they don't really remember what that meant. And I just think that the game in what it was is so different than what it is today that I think that I kind of agree. I log in. It's just relaxing. I look forward to playing in a way that I haven't looked forward to playing really anything in a long, long time. And so I think that we're in a good spot with Classic. The population is going to fluctuate. You're going to see people who want it to die come up with doom and gloom, but I really think we're in a good spot. I really hope that Blizzard's taking everything they can out of looking at how people are playing it and where they really are enjoying the most, and they can integrate that into the retail game. And I honestly am really excited to see what Blizzard does with that.
I am too, and I guess one of the things that I want to do here, and I think I'll try to do it first, but in that same vein, like I've been beating myself up or like thinking through it in my mind how to tell somebody about Classic WoW. Like maybe they haven't played, or maybe they're in retail and, maybe they're just like, oh, I already did that. Or, I'm good in the fresh game. And so I'm kind of curious how you would describe it, when you have the 10 seconds to explain to somebody to play a game. Where most gamers, if someone's like, hey, you should try this, most people are going to do it, right? But Classic's interesting because it's an old game. And I think for me, the way that I explain it to myself or to people that didn't experience it or are now in the retail game and maybe didn't play it, I kind of look at it and say, this is the game that killed what was previously thought to be the MMO genre and created a brand new one from scratch. This is the game that has lasted longer and is more successful than any other massively multiplayer online game. And it's still relevant this many years later. You just kind of have to go check it out.
I agree. I think there's a lot of opportunity for people who have never played WoW or really even never enjoyed an MMO to jump into Classic WoW, find a guild, find some social interaction with people, and just really kind of enjoy the experience. And speaking of that, if you're looking to jump into WoW for the first time and you found us on YouTube, then I think that we have a great opportunity for you to join the RestedXP Guild from XP Gaming. We're on Thunderfury-US for Horde. And come on in and jump. Anybody in the guild can do a G invite. We're a social guild, and we're really looking forward to leverage every part of the game to just have a good time playing with each other.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, that's really everything we wanted to talk about Classic. Was there anything else you wanted to chat about before we signed off for this first episode in the Classic series?
No, I just want to make sure everyone has an invitation to join us in Classic WoW. And if you've never played WoW, it's a great time to jump in and kind of experience what really made this game popular. And if you have played WoW and it's been a long time since you come back, and it's a great time if you're just finding us out there on the internet and you're just trying to look at some content about Classic WoW and you're trying to decide, do I want to try this or not? It's a great time to come back and do it. I would say follow us on YouTube. This is a new adventure for MTB and I. and look forward to making more episodes about Classic WoW and other video games. We're looking to be a general gaming channel and doing some content revolving around just the gaming industry and our experience in it and what we like to do and what's fun, and looking forward to making more.
Awesome. Yeah, and I promise I will do my best to get Ronal onto all the social platforms, but we'll make sure that we have the Discord link to the RestedXP Guild posted. If you're looking to find me, my tag is MTB Trigger. I'm also in the RestedXP Guild, but you can find me on Twitter. I also stream on Twitch, and if you happen to play PlayerUnknown Battleground or PUBG, I also run a podcast named Winner, the PUBG podcast over there. So all the information on how to find us is going to be in the notes, and it'll be down below on the YouTube here. And yeah, reach out, ask questions. This is something we're going to be doing going forward. We're going to cover all kinds of games, but we'll probably be in this series for a little while at least. And we look forward to talking to you. If you got questions or you got things about Classic you think we should talk about, let us know. Yeah, that's really all I got.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching, and look out for the next episode.
Talk to you soon.